you are out in the boondocks. And we were supposed to be at this GPS coordinates at 5:30 exactly. We were like 5 minutes late, and the guy was not happy with us because they have a whole ritual, and the bears are expecting to have salmon thrown out into this river at a specific time. And so us being 5 minutes late actually threw things off for him completely. And they march you into your cabin, right? You march through the forest with like a small backpack or whatever, and they instruct you, be very, very careful about what you're wearing and what kind of food you're bringing, because you don't want to have the wrong smells and such. Yeah. So I want to recommend two places outside of Riga for you, aside from Jampils Castle. Česis is spelled Cesis. Česis and Kuliga are very historic and interesting, charming towns that you can go to for a budget, and there's very few tourists there, and you get this feeling like, wow, I'm in an affordable, charming, and interesting and walkable European town, and where the hell are all the tourists? They are not here. It's a very unique feeling in Europe because you can't find any place in Europe, especially in the summertime, that's like this.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show. Dave, welcome back to the show. How are you doing? Where are you right now?
Great. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. What have you been up to?
I've either been traveling, wanting to travel, or planning travel. I'm always in one of those three stages. I'm either actively doing it, wishing I was doing it, or planning the next trip, or sometimes all three of them at the same time.
And how does work fit into all that?
Work is a necessary evil. I think one of your countrymen, Morrissey, once had a song called Work is a Four-Letter Word, which was a B-side for one of his singles, and I subscribe to that. So no, I actually enjoy my work. However, come on, travel is where it's at, man.
You're based in Florida, right?
Yeah, correct. I am based in Florida, and as I was saying, it's mid-April here as we're recording this, and the weather is absolutely perfect, but I know it won't be for very long. And I think one of the key things about travel and wanderlust is wishing for different weather, isn't it? I forget who was it who said that. I think it was Marcel Proust who said that a change in the weather gives you an opportunity to reinvent yourself or something like that. And I think it's true. I think a lot of travel longings and wanderlust emanate from a desire for a change in weather, don't they?
Yes. And do you think different people have a preference? So what I mean by that is I always hark about the sun. So you mentioned pre-recorded and that I should get down to Florida, which is definitely true. I should. Because I love the sun, right? And Australia is obviously somewhere that I always hark back to. But do you think people then crave the snow as well, which I totally don't?
Well, people crave skiing and activities. I would say it's a good question. It's funny because just yesterday, we have an Amish community here in Florida, an hour away. And I was in Pinecraft, Florida yesterday, filming a video. I interviewed a whole bunch of Amish people in this community. I'm going to have a video out about it, by the way, in about a week or so. By the time this episode comes out, it should be available. But very interesting Amish community in Florida. And believe it or not, even the Amish are snowboards. There's even Amish snowbirds and Amish spring breakers who come down here. Most of them live in Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and even they come down here. Some of them, I interviewed a few of them who moved down here. And they said, I asked them, well, do you like it better in Florida? Do you like it up north? And two or three of them all mentioned snow, that they missed snow, not necessarily being outdoors in it, but being inside, nice and warm inside their homes and looking out at the snow. So even the Amish, want to go on vacation and have a bit of wanderlust. Even they want to come to Florida to enjoy our warm weather. But those of them who stay here too long, they do miss the snow. Now, I grew up in Buffalo, which is one of the snowiest places in America. And I don't miss the snow really at all. I do miss skiing. So
that's interesting because I don't like skiing. So the question is, why do I want snow? People here they love skiing and snowboarding, but I don't. So I don't get the appeal of the winter. Just don't understand.
Right.
There you go.
I don't get the appeal of winter just generally either. That's why I moved to Florida.
But then there's no perfect place. I've racked my brains for this for ages. And
no, there isn't. If there was a perfect, no need to travel, right? So I'm glad that there isn't a perfect place.
True. Can we just touch on the Amish before we get on to the Baltics,
Yeah,
which is going to start the
sure.
episode? Forgive my ignorance. I actually know very little about the Amish.
Yeah.
Are these the guys that are traveling around in the horse and carts and stuff like that?
Yes, they are. Generally, now different Amish communities, some are much more conservative and hardcore than others, but generally they live very simple and very modest lives. Modesty is their key theme.
Mm-hmm.
And they dress very, very modestly. The women will wear these very plain dresses that go all the way down to their ankles. They do come to the beach here in Florida. You see them even at the beach. They are often dressed in these ankle length, sort of smock type dresses. They generally do not use electricity in their homes. They do not drive cars, although I found out the other day, I was literally driving around an Amish guy yesterday. He said he was going to introduce me to his preacher. And I said, well, do we have to walk? And he said, you can drive me if you want. I said, oh, cool. Hop in the car then. So I actually drove this Amish guy to go meet this preacher. So, and they generally don't use smartphones, although some of them have flip phones. But it really depends from community to community. But they're very interesting people, and they're very, very kind and hardworking people too, and interesting.
This might sound almost slightly offensive, right? But when we were driving across America last year, we did see some Amish on the road not in a car, in a sort of horse and cart. And it was a bit shocking to see. I was like, oh, wow, this is like going back to Victorian times. Like, why are they traveling like that? With these trucks and cars whizzing past them at 80 miles an hour. Yet they're just like trundling along in what I would perceive as like Victorian time transport.
Yes, and they speak German too. They speak, a form of High German. It's not exactly like modern German, but it's quite similar. And they have their church services, which I found out last a shocking 2.5 hours long, which I told my children when I came home, because my kids complained about a 1 hour Catholic, church service. I told them, how would you like to be Amish? 2.5 hours, boys.
Wow. And is it true that they get 1 year out of the community to go into the other communities, or is
that generally is true? Like when they're in their late teens or so, they get a chance to sort of go out into the world to decide they can. It's not like obligatory for them to do so, but they have an opportunity to decide whether they want to remain Amish or not. Now, there's a television show called Breaking Amish, sort of about exactly that. I don't know if that show is still going on or not, but there was a show called Breaking Amish about sort of young Amish kind of going wild. And season 2 of that was filmed in Pinecraft, which is the community here in Florida that I was just at yesterday. So it is an interesting community. It's kind of where the Amish go to I'm not going to say party, because it's not like there's wet t-shirt contests or like booty shake contests down there. It's not typical. It's not typical spring break. I don't want people to think that, but they do let their hair down a little bit when they come to Florida.
Okay. And lastly, how are they perceived in American community?
The Amish, they are perceived as sort of an oddity, a curiosity, although I think a lot of people really respect them, especially, in this modern age where a lot of people are kind of disgusted by how much time they spend on their phones and by technology. I think there's a respect for them. I think they're definitely respected. They're also, but they're also a curiosity. I mean, people want to take pictures of them, though they generally don't like having their photo taken. Although I found out yesterday, some of them don't mind being filmed and being on YouTube, which was great for me. So yeah, but they are viewed as a bit of an oddity. I'm not going to lie.
Okay, interesting. I need to do more research on those guys. Okay, we're going to go to the Baltics. You've done a trip there recently. We've got some interesting nuggets in here. I actually first wanted to ask, what was the feel like as a whole? I know you went to a few countries, just with current events, Ukraine, Russia stuff. They're very close to the border of Russia, and I think Finland's joined NATO and stuff like that. So how was the general feel, or did you not really feel anything was different in your opinion?
Oh, things were very different. You can't escape the politics traveling to this region. I thought this was really fascinating because at 2 different points in the trip, we were literally at the Russian border. So in the beginning of the trip, we spent the first week in Finland, and we went on a bear watching excursion up in a very small town called Kuusamo. That's spelled Kuusamo, I believe, although I'm not great at spelling. And literally this bear watching reserve is at the end of the road. There is the Russian border. And we went down there just to look at it. We were amazed too. We were thinking there was going to be soldiers. There was going to be like barbed wire. There was nothing. All there was security cameras on a tree out in the forest. It was really amazing.
Oh, wow.
And they're watching 24 hours a day, I was told, but there's actually no soldiers there. But you're thinking about it all the time in the Balkan countries and also in Finland, because first of all, you see Ukrainian flags everywhere. I mean, I'd never seen anything like this.
Wow.
So first of all, you see more Ukrainian flags in each of these four countries than you do the national flag, especially in places like Latvia, because now in Latvia, there's a 25% ethnic Russian minority there. And so what Latvians were telling me was, and there's always been somewhat fractious relations between the two communities, the Latvians and the Russians. And so Latvia has passed many laws trying to get the ethnic Russians there to speak Latvian, not Russian, and things like this. So the relations have always been a little bit frosty. And so the Latvians have used sort of their pro-Ukraine support to kind of stick it to the Russians in their country in a way. Like, for example, when you're in Riga, you notice that the trams have Ukrainian flag, are completely emblazoned in Ukrainian flags. And I don't mean just on the very front of the tram. I mean, every tram car. So like when the tram goes by, it's, whoa, there's a whole whiz of Ukrainian flags. And one guy told me that it was kind of a way to stick them, not only to show support for Ukraine, but also to extend a middle finger to the ethnic Russians in Latvia who refuse to learn Latvian and embrace Latvian culture.
But those ethnic Russians might not agree with, obviously, the occupation, right? Or the war,
They may not. But from what people that I spoke to there said, in a way, just as the Latvians like to support Ukraine as a way to thumb their noses at the other side, many of the Russians there do supposedly embrace Putin and the war, just as a way to express that they don't like seeing the Ukrainian flag everywhere they go.
Oh, so interesting. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. One other important thing I should mention on that front, James, is that, and this actually really worked to our benefit because, as I was telling you before we started recording, every summer we take one big international trip. And so I'm a family person too. I love to take my children with me on the big trips that we take in the summertime. And so we go during their school holidays. We spend a month in some different part of the world. And it's very hard to find a place that has good weather in the summertime and we think will not be really, really crowded. Now, before we went, I thought, okay, Tallinn will be crowded. Vilnius may or may not be crowded. Riga will be crowded. It turned out nowhere was crowded with tourists. And one of the major reasons for that was two things. First of all, the war. We were told that a lot of tour groups, especially tour groups from China, had canceled, even though there's no war going on in these places. It's close enough that they thought, let's give this region a pass. There's many, many tour groups who canceled, at least as of last summer. Also, and this is, I think, really interesting too, these four countries have all banned Russian tourists. There are four of the only countries in the world, along with Poland, who have banned Russians from getting tourist visas. So you don't have the Russian tourists there, which is also a major thing. So I was very pleasantly surprised. Now I feel sorry for the local people who are trying to make a living from the tourism sector because tourism is down in those countries. They're trying to make a principled stand by not letting Russians in. But for us as visitors who like to have obviously fewer crowds, it was great because it wasn't crowded anywhere we went, even in Tallinn, which is, arguably the most touristy of any of the places that we went.
Oh, that's a great tip for anyone in Europe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'll tell you, Europe is, as you know, trying to find places in the summertime in Europe that aren't crowded with tourists is not easy.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. I think February, March last year, going across Europe on the train, even some bits were really busy then. That's not even the summer, right? So it can get crazy. You went to Finland to start your trip on a bear watching trip. Now, bear watching is interesting because up here in Canada, they live amongst us. So I don't even feel like going bear watching is a thing because they can come down and look for your bins. But how was that experience for you?
I love the bear watching. The bear watching was absolutely fantastic. First of all, there was a very cloak and dagger the gentleman who arranges these. And if you just Google bear watching Kusamo, you will find this guy. He tells you like GPS coordinates of where to meet and at a very specific time. 5:30, meet me at these GPS coordinates about 45 minutes outside of Kusamo. Now, first of all, Kusamo is a town in Finland. This would qualify as a town in a small country like Finland, but in the US, you would almost call this like a village or a hamlet, right? And so you're going 45 minutes outside of Kusamo. Believe me, you are in the middle of nowhere. 35 minutes of that, we did not pass a single like living creature other than maybe a bird or some reindeer, which you do see a lot of reindeer up there, right? you are out in the boondocks. And we were supposed to be at this GPS coordinates at 5:30 exactly. We were like 5 minutes late, and the guy was not happy with us because they have a whole ritual, and the bears are expecting to have salmon thrown out into this river at a specific time. And so us being 5 minutes late actually threw things off for him completely. And they march you into your cabin, right? You march through the forest with like a small backpack or whatever, and they instruct you, be very, very careful about what you're wearing and what kind of food you're bringing in, because you don't want to have the wrong smells and such. Yeah. Don't wear perfume, don't wear cologne. They give you all kinds of interesting instructions. They march you into this cabin, and then you are there. You are not supposed to leave that cabin until you check out the next day, because there's too many bears in the area, and they don't want the liability of you wandering around or deciding to, you don't want to take a leak in the toilet, which is attached to your hut. You want to go take a walk and take a leak somewhere else. You could get mauled by a bear. So they tuck you in sort of into this cabin, right? There's binoculars there. And there's also, there's like little pouch things. So if you want to put your camera out of your hut to try to get a better photo of them, you can do that. But maybe 15 minutes after you arrive, this guy and his wife, they go out. The setting is a completely rural area. All you see is this lake and all of these trees, the taiga, the forest, right? And they go out by the lake, and at a specific time, like 5:45 or whatever, every day, they throw salmon out there, and also dog food, weirdly enough. And I said, why dog food? They said, well, because it's cheap and the bears like it. So they supplement the salmon with dog food. And all of a sudden they come out from the forest one by one. And the next thing you know, there's like, you're looking out and you've got these picture windows in your hut, right? The hut has completely huge, big window. You're looking out on this scenery of, maybe 8, 10, 12 huge brown bears feasting. And it is absolutely fascinating. In my teenagers, if they're staying at a place that does not have Wi-Fi and no video games, no PlayStation, they start to go through withdrawal. Even the teenagers were like glued to their seats. Like, oh my God, there's bears everywhere. Where do we look? It was absolutely fascinating. And the thing is, at that time we were there it was July. It doesn't really get dark there at all. So we stayed the night in this cabin. Yeah. And after the initial feeding, some of them come back out of the woods to scavenge later in the night. So I did not hardly sleep at all the entire night, because I kept waking up just looking out the window to see, oh my God, are there more bears? Just watching these bears all night long until like 9 or 10 a.m. when they come to pick you up in the morning, and you check out and they march you back out of the woods, back out to your car.
Oh, wow. I mean, you made me laugh when you mentioned your host and the tour owner, because we stayed in an Airbnb in the Yukon, right? And the guy who owned our Airbnb about 30 minutes outside of Whitehorse is nuts. And he was obviously an expert, because he's telling us different types of bears and what they do, right? So he explained to us that, black, brown grizzly bears, black bears, he said, it's fine. I wouldn't be worried about them. Brown bears, they would hunt you for food. And grizzly bears, they'd hunt you just to play with you, right? And obviously eat you as well, but more sinister. But he had shotguns. He woke us up in the middle of the night with a shotgun because he wanted to see the Northern Lights. But yeah, he was explaining in the summer, you just got to respect them, respect their space. Don't stop on the road and take photos. Give them space. Take them seriously. I know that might sound strange, because people are like, oh, we would take it seriously. But in a situation with a bear, you've got to act calmly, because if you make the wrong move, you're done, right? So yeah, this guy was very interesting.
This gentleman, Pekka, who runs this place, he and his wife, that I found very interesting about them, is they live out in this area. It's right near, by the way, Ulanka National Park in Finland, which is a beautiful place to hike. And hiking in Finland is a delight. But he used to work at this Ulanka National Park, and he lives in this area. And the thing that year round, even though you can only do the bear watching, like, because bears hibernate for like 6 months a year. Yeah. So you can only do this bear watching from like spring to fall. They live in this area, and he has to chop wood. He has no central heating or anything like that. They've got to heat their homes with just chopping wood. I was thinking, my God, and it gets bitterly cold up there too. This is right near the Russian border. And I thought, man, you got to be a very tough person, and also quite an introvert, an interesting sort of character to live out in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors within a half-hour radius of you other than bears and other wild creatures.
Yeah, good point. Introverted. Yeah, that's a very good point. This guy who owns swathes of land in Yukon, yeah, he's literally near no one. I mean, he's half an hour drive from Whitehorse. Now, in the winter, that's a tough drive because snow's everywhere and the icy roads just about get gritted, so you could probably drive it. But yeah, this guy was interesting, had snowmobiles, the whole lot. So he had an interesting job, actually. He used to work for the government, digging out Agent Orange in the Yukon. That's what he said. Because they dumped it there. Yeah. That's what I said he used to do. Yeah.
So the reason why I went up there is because I thought, okay, we've only got a week in Finland, and sometimes when I have a small amount of time in a relatively large geographic country like that, I think, okay, I'm obviously going to Helsinki because I'm flying in there and such. But like, you want to have sort of unusual experiences, and I knew I couldn't visit all of the cities of Helsinki, but I thought, you know what, I want to have a couple of different experiences. I want to be out in the middle of nowhere in nature in Finland. I want to go to a national park. I want to stay on a lake, have a cabin that has its own sauna, because the Finns are huge on sauna, and we did all of those things. We also experienced the trains in Finland too, which one of the things I recommend about Finland is very expensive country with very dirt cheap trains. Believe it or not, the only thing. I made a YouTube video about this. The only cheap thing in Finland is riding the train. It was absolutely remarkable. They subsidized the heck out of train travel there, and it cost me for 4 tickets, family of 4, to travel from Helsinki to Oulu, which is from Oulu is where I rented the car to go bear watching and go to Ulanka National Park. I believe it was a 6 or 7 hour train ride. It was something like the equivalent of about $60 for 4 tickets.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. And of course, the trains are really nice there too. They have Wi-Fi on them. Train travel is just wonderful in Finland.
It's mostly good in Europe, right? I think UK has one of the worst train services in Europe, if not the worst.
But it's not cheap in the UK. Yeah.
No, it's not. Oh God, no. It's the most expensive in the world, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's privatized, so they've got to figure that one out. Okay. Finland, never been. And just to finalize, it's just one of those countries that it's there, but I don't think many people know what it's about. I mean, in UK, if you ask someone, oh, what is Finland? They'll probably tell you Helsinki, Formula One, because they have lots of Formula One drivers that good in the past, like Mika Hakkinen and Kimi Räikkönen, and that's pretty much about it. And
it's also the happiest country in the world too, 2 years in a row.
All right, okay, there you go.
Finnish sauna too. Like, you go to the saunas, it's fantastic. I mean, you go to the saunas. Helsinki is a beautiful place. You can understand why it's a happy place when you get there, especially in the summertime. The days are very, very long. It was getting dark around 11 p.m. when we were there in Helsinki. You go further north to the bear watching in Kuusamo, it doesn't get dark at all. You've got these very, very long summer days. You go to these wonderful saunas, which the one that we went to called Loili, they have it set up. There's a bar there as well, too. So you're not just sitting in a sauna. You're coming in and out of the sauna, having pints of beer. I mean, and they've got it all worked out. You're right on the Baltic Sea. It's a city of very attractive people. I could recommend it for both men and women who are single. I'm a married man, family man, but I'm not blind. I did look around. I saw there was a lot of very attractive people there. The coffee is fantastic there. I mean, like Americans, a lot of us complain about European coffee because they don't give us a quantity of coffee. The coffee is very good in Europe, but it's like you get these tiny little coffees. No, the Finns are unique in Europe in their coffee drinking consumption. They're similar to us, weirdly enough. Okay. They're not like the rest of Europe. They drink very high quality coffee, but they believe in like refills. You know what I mean? You can get like a refill for free. They'll fill your coffee back up again, which good luck getting that in Italy or anywhere else in Europe.
Yeah, very true.
So I loved Finland. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Finland is on my list, I think. But obviously you're bound by the time, right? So it has to be summer, obviously, unless you want to go in the snow.
Yes.
What about Estonia? So you got here that you went to Kinhu, I don't know if I pronounced that right, which is their imaginary women's island.
Yeah. So a few years ago, I knew I was going to go to these countries, right? And I read an article in the New York Times. It was one of these viral stories where you go into the most read section. It was the most popular story of the time. And it's one of these girl power stories read about this island where women run everything. And I thought, I made a mental, I'm like, I got to visit this island. And they said in the article that there were only 5 men living on the island, and it was run by women, almost entirely inhabited by women, and so on and so forth. And I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. So then I went on YouTube to try to see some more videos of it and stuff like that. And sure enough, on YouTube, a lot of very famous YouTubers have made videos saying, find the last matriarchy. They were calling it the last matriarchy in Europe and so on and so forth. Women's Island, run by women, all this stuff. I thought, I got to go there. Sounds super interesting. So I also have a fetish for islands that you have to take boats to. as opposed to islands where you cannot fly there are generally unspoiled. That's my rule for Greek islands too. I like to go to the ones you got to take a boat to. Then you know that it's going to be unspoiled. So we went there, and I found, I wrote an article about this for, I think it was the Spectator, and I also made a video about this. The reality of Kinu is it is absolutely not a women's island at all. I found out, it's amazing to me, like travel writers are so lazy. Publications these days, instead of just trying to actually do any fact finding, they push and promote narratives. Yeah. So the person has already decided before they get there what the story is. Oh, women's island. And then they go there and then they try to just corroborate that narrative that they've already, formed. And I find, like, a good traveler, I don't think I'm, a great traveler or anything like that, but I try to at least keep my eyes and ears open when I go to a place, and my mind open, and I don't already decide, okay, this place is going to be like whatever, and then just try to prove that when I get there. So I went there, eyes open. I was hoping it was going to be a woman's island. Believe me, I didn't go there thinking, oh, let's try to debunk this place. I honestly didn't. I believed all the stuff that I saw. It was in New York, and it wasn't just New York Times. So there was New York Times, it was BBC, it was many famous YouTubers all saying women's island. You get off the boat and you're like, wait a minute, why are there so many men around? That was so immediately I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like a women's island because there's just too damn many men around.
Yeah.
So I started getting suspicious and I started asking people lots of questions. I found out, first of all, the place is not run by women. That was the big problem for starters. Anybody could have just Googled this and found out that the mayor of the island is a man. I thought, okay, but maybe when the article came out, maybe it wasn't. Nope. I looked it up, and like of the last 7 or 8 mayors, I think like the only one of them was female. And they have like a village council, right, which has like 8 people on it. And the current makeup of it is like 6 men and 2 women. So like there was no charitable way to say that women run the island, for one thing. Okay, so then I asked them, well, is there a census data? Then I looked up the census data, which any of these writers or YouTubers could have Googled this census Kinu, but no one did it. This island is actually more male than Estonia as a whole. So like Estonia is something like 52% female, the whole country.
Yeah.
Whereas this island is like 51% female, 49% male. The entire thing is essentially a hoax. And I was fascinated by that, the fact that everyone lied about this island. But I was also a little disappointed too, because I was hoping it was going to be just this weird island where there was nothing but women. But when you think about it, that doesn't make any sense, does it? So basically, historically, many, many, many decades ago, like let's say 100 years ago, when the island's economy revolved around fishing, it was mostly women there because the men would go away for many, many months fishing. But that has not been the case since probably like, between World War I and World War II. So this was a very outdated information that people were relying on and pushing just in order to sort of present a girl power narrative. Like, look at this wonderful island where women run everything. But in fact, the women there are just as pissed off as women in many other places because they think that the men have too much power and influence. There was one woman who was like, yeah, the men, unfortunately, don't give us enough of a say. So they have the same problems as women in every other darn place.
What's annoying about this is that it's laziness, you're right, but it's also a bit worrying that it's easy to find this out, but this is YouTubers, writers previously would put the narrative first instead of the facts.
Right.
That's grim.
But guess what? That narrative works for clicks. If you look at the YouTube videos that say that, this is a women's island, they've got millions of views. My video saying that it isn't and showing the real truth has like 400 views. So guess what? Maybe I should have just gone there and said, look at this wonderful women's island where there's no men. Maybe I should have lied too. I'd have more views and subscribers. Some people just want to be told, they want to be spoon-fed whatever they would like to hear. And the scary thing is that people really rely upon media. And I say this as a member of the media. People rely upon the media for information. However, what they're being fed are different narratives to suit the writer, the publication, the editors, or whomever. And people don't realize that they're being brainwashed to believe one thing or another, one set of beliefs or another, depending upon what publication they're clicking into. And I say that in a nonpartisan way that, here in the US, the right-leaning conservative publications do the same things as the left-leaning ones. They're both trying to brainwash you in a specific direction.
And I don't know if this is controversial. This is why I do love the BBC. I know people don't like BBC in the UK because they feel like
Mm-hmm.
They have to pay for it, but it is about as impartial as it gets. And whether you like that or not,
that's why I was surprised that even BBC dropped the ball on Kinu.
Well,
if you Google Kinu BBC, they didn't bother Googling census or who's the mayor or anything either. Very sloppy. But, that's the thing is that, travel writers sometimes think that they're immune from the normal rules of journalism, but I don't just cover travel. I cover lots of different things. So I take the same mentality into writing a travel related article as any other article. Because guess what? Even people who are reading a travel article don't want to be fed a bunch of BS and lies, do they?
No, absolutely not. And where's the integrity of the writer or the YouTuber? Surely that comes first as a person.
The laziness too.
Yeah.
It's the laziness too.
Oh, okay. You did write an article about Latvia as well, which is obviously a place that you loved visiting.
Oh, yeah. Latvia. So listen, of the 4 countries, I had the least expectation for Latvia. I don't even know anybody who'd been to Latvia. Like I had not heard a damn thing about Latvia before I went there. So, I read some of these travel publications. I subscribe to some of them. You never read anything about Latvia. If you do see something about Latvia, it's about Riga.
Yeah.
Other than Riga, I have not seen a darn thing about any place in the entire country of Latvia. I've never seen an article about any other place in my life. So first of all, I was choosing my itinerary like almost randomly, right? Didn't have any guidebook. I knew I was going to go to Riga. It's like, okay, where else should I go in Latvia? Almost like throwing darts at a map because you can hardly find anything out about this country because hardly anybody goes there. It turned out of the 4 countries, Latvia was my favorite in many ways because first of all, it's far surpassed my expectation, which my expectation was nil. Second of all, of the 4 countries, it is by far the cheapest. Okay. That was a very pleasant surprise, especially when you're traveling with a family, you're paying for 4 people. Cost is a big deal. The prices in Latvia are, I would say, 50% lower than Estonia and maybe 25 or 30% lower than Lithuania. Also probably 50% or 75% lower than Finland. So of the 4 countries,
wow,
it is a cheapskate's paradise.
Yeah,
you can still, and believe me, there are very few places left in Europe, as you know, as a Brit, where you can go for a reasonable amount of money these days. And Latvia is certainly one of them. There are many, many, many. If you like castles and historic manor houses, there's tons of these places in Latvia. I wanted to also have the experience of sleeping in a castle. And I did that in Latvia at a place called Jaunpils. That is spelled Jaunpils, Jaunpils Castle. Highly recommend this place. Probably the only place in Europe where you can sleep in a castle for, I think, so first of all, they have a youth hostel wing in this castle. Like what other castles like bother to care about dormitory youth hostel? None, which I think is like 20 euros or something like that. You can get a nice big room as we did for like, I think it was about $100 or so. A nice big room in a castle with your own fireplace and like 20-foot high ceilings and such. And they have gourmet food for a very reasonable price. I love this castle. So Latvia generally, also the people were, of the 4 countries, I think the most outgoing and interesting and friendly and curious too, because they get so few tourists in Latvia outside of Riga. Again, we'll get to Riga in a minute, but outside of Riga, people are all like, you're American here in Latvia. What in the hell are you doing here? And we're very interested to talk to us. So I found that interesting. Why are you, I think the title of the article that I wrote, I didn't headline it, but was, what are you doing in Latvia? Or why are you in Latvia? Or something like that, which was the question we were getting. We were greeted with curiosity, but also hospitality in Latvia. And I just love this country. There's a town in Latvia called Kuldiga, Kuldiga, that just became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's going to get more touristed now, but.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
That town and also Chessis. So I want to recommend 2 places outside of Riga for you, aside from Jaanpils Castle. Cesis is spelled Cesis. Cesis and Kuliga are very historic and interesting, charming towns that you can go to for a budget. And there's very few tourists there. And you get this feeling like, wow, I'm in a affordable, charming, and interesting and walkable European town. And where the hell are all the tourists? They are not here. It's a very unique feeling in Europe because you can't find any place in Europe, especially in the summertime, that's like this.
Yeah, this is the area of the world that people just don't really go to that much. The only thing I'd say about Latvia, you mentioned Riga, which we'll come to, it's kind of known in UK as the bachelor stag do place to go, right? And it's actually got a bit worse over the years. I don't know if they've trying to curb that now or trying to move away from that sort of place to go. But if it's so cheap, then Brits are going to go there.
That is very controversial there. I got into that in my article because a number of people spoke to me in Riga about that. The locals do not like that at all. One morning, and I chronicled this on my YouTube channel, I met this Turkish guy who was a student who's been living in Riga for several years. He's a graduate student there. And I had breakfast with this guy, and he was complaining to me about the Brits coming there for their stag do's.
Yeah.
And he was saying they're ruining it for all of us other guys who are just trying to hook up here. You know, honest guys who are just trying to hook up because the women of Riga are tired of being hit on by guys who are on their stag parties. And he was saying, you know, that Latvian women, first of all, they are the tallest in the world. I don't know. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Yes. So Latvian women are known to be the tallest in the world. And many people think that they are also among the most beautiful women of the world. So that's why I think it got on the stag radar. But he was saying he doesn't understand why all these Brits come there, because he said that, you know, somehow the rumor has gotten out that it's easy in Riga. And he says this is not the case at all, because he said the women here are very intelligent. They're very beautiful. He said most of them can speak 3, 4, 5 languages. They can play multiple instruments. They're highly cultured. And he says you get these guys who come off the plane from like Newcastle or wherever who can barely, you know, put, you know, a sentence together. And they think that, he says, these completely uncultured guys think that from Britain think that they're going to step off the plane in Riga and like immediately have women, you know, fawning over them. And this is not the case at all, he said. So he said, you know, he's telling me in your article, make sure you mention to people that, no, this is not a place, if you're just a horny guy, where you should go.
Yeah. And that is a stain on our reputation. Many stains in Europe, but that is one of them. And it's not just Riga, right? There's certain places in Europe that get a reputation from us. We
did see that, though. So they have these things, they're called the cycle pubs there.
Yeah.
So you see these young guys who are on their stag do's. And what it is like a small vehicle, and they're all pedaling around and drinking. You know, it has a bar, and so they're riding around and like making a lot of noise and stuff like that. That kind of thing doesn't bother me at all. And I'll tell you something. Like Riga, I knew it was a stag location. It does not look seedy at all. I mean, you don't see a lot of strip joints. I mean, I'm sure that stuff exists, but it's not. There aren't a lot of sex shops. It's not a lot of peep shows and like that kind of. It doesn't look seedy or tawdry at all. So if you didn't see these guys pedaling around on these weird vehicles, you wouldn't even know that Riga was known for that kind of thing, because wherever it is, it's not in the old town. It's not in a touristy area. So wherever the red light district is, you're not even going to notice it as a visitor, unless you're looking for that stuff, of course.
I think it's fair to say it's not the basis of all stag do's, the women. I think the actual base of it is the cost. And then you mentioned the super cheap, right? So I think that is really a strong point of why people plan to go there, not just the women.
Riga's not that cheap, I'll say, though. Like, you know, Riga's of the capitals, it's definitely cheaper a little bit. Well, I would say Riga and Vilnius are similar price-wise. Riga's definitely a little cheaper than Tallinn, and it's definitely cheaper than Helsinki. But where I'm saying the bargains are is outside of Riga.
Got it.
Anywhere else in the country.
Okay. And just to finish your trip there in Lithuania, just touch on that before we get to a bit of travel.
I love Lithuania too. First of all, Lithuania for me was a couple of different things that I loved about. First of all, the Curonian Spit, right, which is this little spit of land. It's about 100 kilometers long. Geographic oddity. I love places like this because about little more than half of it belongs to Lithuania and the other half of it belongs to Russia. So I was really curious about what this was going to be like. So we stayed in a town called Nida, Nida, which I highly recommend. Nida is almost flush on the Russian border. And this was also quite interesting because the Curonian Spit, this used to be a police border. Now, this border is also, the beginning of the NATO zone and the end of the NATO zone there. And it used to be policed. It used to have, an official border crossing there where if you had a visa, you could go across to Kaliningrad. Now it is no longer there. And again, it's really weird. Part of the border is right on the beach and there's almost like a rope line. I made a video about this too, just to show what this looks like. But it's, again, not policed. And you're like, wow. And people I spoke to in NITA were legitimately concerned too. Lithuania is another very pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian country. People I spoke to there were legitimately concerned. They were saying, look, Putin, he took Ukraine. Imagine how easily he could roll right across this non-existent border with his tanks. Right, he could take the Curonian Spit like that.
Yeah.
However, would he? Because Lithuania is a NATO country, which, Ukraine was not. Who knows whether he would or wouldn't? But it was very interesting talking to people of NITA, because for us as Americans, or you as a Brit or as Canadians, thinking about Russia and the threat of Russia and Putin is almost theoretical because we don't live, close to where he could come in. But when you live in the Curonian Spit on the Lithuanian bit of it, and you're sharing this little spit of land, half of which is owned by your country and half of which is owned by Russia, it's not a theoretical exercise at all. Nor is it for the Finns, because the Finns have been invaded by Russia and ruled by Russia too. So from the geopolitical aspect of it, it was very interesting. The beaches are also very nice on the Curonian Spit. It's a paradise for cyclists because there's bike paths everywhere. Nature there is really pretty. There's all kinds of trees. I love the Curonian Spit. I loved Vilnius was incredibly vibrant and buzzing. I was like, I couldn't figure Vilnius is out. First of all, they claim to have the biggest old town in Europe. I did not fact check that. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is big. The interesting thing about it is, as you know, there's a lot of towns you'll go to where you're like, okay, where is the bar street of this town? Like, where is the place where people are all hanging out at night or, outdoors? There's like 20 of those in Vilnius. I couldn't even figure it out. It was like, because like the one night we were like, okay, wow, this seems to be the bar street. There's like tons of people out and about, all sitting outside in the street. Then the next night we found another, and the next night another and another. It's everywhere, especially in the summertime there, because again, they have pretty late nights there. It was super vibrant. It was really nice. The last thing I want to mention about Vilnius that I highly recommend is the Hill of Crosses, which is out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of northern Lithuania. You get to literally a hill where there are maybe 1 million crosses planted all around this hill, crosses of all kinds, tiny little ones, giant, huge ones. And it is a symbol of resistance to Russian tyranny. Many years ago, I don't have the facts, I'll mention, all the dates in my articles, but basically a long, long time ago, during the Soviet era, all of these crosses were placed there, and the Soviets, being atheists, tried to bulldoze the hill. They bulldozed during Soviet times, this Hill of Crosses, 2 or 3 times, and they removed all of the crosses. And each time they did this, the Lithuanians went to the hill and put more crosses up. So they would bulldoze the hill, remove all the crosses, then they'd come back the next day and there'd be 3 times as many crosses there overnight as there were the day before. And so it's become sort of a pilgrimage site over the years, and it's a very, very moving place, and it's just visually stunning. It's very, very interesting. I lied. One more thing about Lithuania. The food there is amazing. If you're a potato eater like me,
oh yeah,
I loved meat. If you're a meat and potatoes guy, you will do very well in Lithuania. I ate extremely well there. I loved it.
I think that's a cool trip in the summer, isn't it? Like a month. I think you said you went about 3 or 4 weeks.
It was just fantastic. Around,
yeah,
it was 1 month. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Baltics.
About a week in each one.
Yeah, that is a cool, nice trip in the summer, that. I can't believe I've not done it. But do you fear that it'll get busier in the years coming up?
It will when they improve the train links. So they're supposedly, I don't know, in a few years from now, going to improve the train links between the 3 countries. Because as of right now, the train links are very bad. Normally, I like taking trains, but on this trip, for most of the trip, I rented a car, which was a major expense. That was the one really expensive thing, because if you want to rent a car in Tallinn and then drop it off in Vilnius, the cost is crazy.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to rent the car in Tallinn and then drop it off in Riga, which was slightly less expensive, but still quite pricey. So you get in. But once they improve the train links between these 3 capitals, I think it will get busier.
Okay. And can you get buses and public transport between the countries, right?
You can, but I despise buses. I'm not a
Okay,
bus guy, James.
I am.
I would
Okay,
sooner, I would rather just, are you really? I would rather
yeah.
just stay home than take a bus anyway. I'm
No,
a
I'm a bus
train
guy.
guy.
Okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
really? You're a bus guy? I've never in my life heard a single person ever say that. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, I love
What do you
buses.
mean you
Yeah.
prefer buses over trains?
Oh God, no, no. But then, if you live in North America, what other choice you got apart from buses, right? If you're going across somewhere not in your own car. I'll tell you why I'm not trains, and this is a bit crazy. It's because UK is so expensive. I always have this in
Mm.
my mind. My base level of trains is, oh, it's too expensive. I'll just get a bus.
Now, there's something, listen, I'm a cheapskate, but there's a couple of things I splurge on. First of all,
Okay.
I do not drink crap, cheap coffee. You know, the hotel will give
Yeah,
you some
I
garbage
agree on
coffee in
that
the
one.
morning for free.
Yeah.
The hotel is going to give me some garbage coffee for free in the morning. No, I'm not drinking that crap. And number two, if a train costs 3 times as much as the bus, I'll still splurge for the train. No buses.
Wow.
You can't, first of all, you can't relieve yourself on a bus usually. No bathroom.
Yeah.
Can't walk around. No dining car. No. Nope, 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 nope. I'm willing to pay for trains. Got to do it.
Okay. Just to finish on buses, and I've done the 34-hour bus from northern Vietnam down to Laos twice.
Mm. I've been on long bus rides too. But you know what? That was when I was young, like you are. I'm now
Oh,
51 years old. I'm too old to ride on garbage buses. Not going to do it anymore.
well, you're too kind. I'm 35 tomorrow, so is that young? I don't know.
No, that's very young. And happy birthday. Happy early birthday too.
Ah, thanks so much. Yeah, yeah. Let's go to travel guilt. Do you have
Hmm.
travel guilt?
Nope. Next topic. Just kidding. No, I do not have travel guilt. I know that a lot of climate activists would like for us to have
Yeah.
travel guilt or would like to make us feel guilty about our climate sins. But you know what? I don't travel on a private jet. And
Mm,
I do not travel 365 days a year. And I think I live my life in a relatively responsible way, my ordinary life when I'm at home. And I think I'm, responsible to the environment in my ordinary life. And so the way I think of travel is I think of travel like kind of like having a dessert, like having a slice of pie or a slice of cake.
okay.
When I'm having a slice of pie, am I thinking about, heart attacks and my cholesterol and the saturated? No, because it's an indulgence, right? I mean,
Yeah.
travel is in and of itself an indulgent exercise, no matter what the hell you're doing. Even if you're like me and you like to learn while you're traveling, let's be honest, it's still pretty indulgent, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when I'm indulging my pleasurable, no, I'm not feeling guilty about it at all. And I don't think I should have to.
Okay. Got 2 points and questions.
Mm,
Personally, I don't feel guilty because I think business travel and private jets are more of a problem.
mm,
And secondly, what about people who travel all the time? So, going to give a bit of a shout out to the extreme travelers who are constantly on the
mm-hmm.
road, traveling all year
Right.
and for years. What about those
No.
guys?
Now, the extreme traveler shouldn't feel guilty either. And I'll tell you why. I love my extreme travelers, and I wrote a book about these characters.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'll tell you what's great about them is they are going to very, very unusual places where other tourists are not going. And they are pumping money into the economy in
Mm,
places like South Sudan and Somaliland and all kinds of other places that nobody else wants to go to, and where the people are very poor and they need that money. And, listen, when you travel to a place like, let's just say South Sudan, for example, which is
mm.
one of these kind of places that they go to, but you could name a million places like
Yeah.
South Sudan. Okay. You are not going to stay in a Marriott there. You're not going to stay in a Hilton. You are not going to be putting your money into a multinational corporation. You are going to be putting money directly into the hands of poor people who need it.
Mm,
Right. So there are many poor people around the world who rely upon tourism, even in countries that don't have a lot of tourists, in order to survive, in order to eat. So I don't think climate activists realize that one out of every 10 jobs in the world is either directly or indirectly
mm.
related to tourism, right? They could single-handedly crash the global economy, and not just in rich countries, but in many, many poor ones too.
Very interesting. Yeah. You actually started the journey for me for interviewing some of the extreme travelers after interviewing yourself about your book. I was quite
Yeah,
intrigued by that community. I didn't know much about them until I read your book. So I've interviewed a few since then.
thank you.
And I've got a quote here, actually, which is from your article. I'm just going to read it. The travel scolds wants us to feel guilty about venturing far from home, when in fact, exploration is still life's greatest university.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I wrote an article about this for The Spectator, and I'll tell you what precipitated it. I've contributed over the years to the New York Times' 52 Places to Go feature. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Have you?
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like a giant listicle, but it's a really well-made listicle, multimedia. And the top comments this year, if you look at it, you look at the most liked comments. And I mean, these are comments that are liked by hundreds of people, not like liked by 10 people, but hundreds. The top two most popular comments were both like along the lines of, why are you even publishing this list? Because travel is so bad for the environment. And I thought to myself, this is the sad state of affairs when we've got people who are reading a travel section and a travel feature, and the most popular reader comments are from people saying we shouldn't even be traveling at all. That is kind of frightening to me. It really is. And I hope that's not the direction we're headed in, because imagine living in a world where nobody goes anywhere and nobody from one country understands any other country in the world. And believe me, if you just want to rely upon the media to color your understanding of other countries, good luck. Good luck, because then you'll believe things like Kinu is an island of women.
And that's the point, right? That is the point. If people don't go out to different cultures and different places in the world, they're not going to learn anything. Potentially be dangerous to your local community where you live by being ignorant or bigots or whatever. I couldn't think of anything worse if you'd done that.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't even have to travel to the country at hand. I learned so much about Ukraine and Russia just by traveling to all these border countries last summer. Can't learn that from reading a newspaper, listening to a podcast, unfortunately. Got to go there sometimes. Although what's great things about reading and listening to podcasts like this one is it sparks your interest in going to places that maybe you hadn't considered before. So, I mean, there's a role for I think people like you and me too. I'm not saying we're obsolete, but there's no substitute for actually getting your boots on the ground in a specific place.
I just can't think of anything better. Like for me, it's a bit personal or selfish in a way. If you took travel away from me tomorrow, I'd have a very low purpose in life. A lot of it would be black holes where what do I do now? It's such a big part of my life. And I think it's a big part of people's lives in general, whether that's just going on vacation to Riga for a stag do, or that is traveling all year, right? I think most people do it who have the privilege.
That's what I wrote my Mad Travelers book about, why I wanted to write that book, is because I wanted to understand why some people can satisfy their wanderlust and their curiosity by just reading a book or going on YouTube, and why others of us, people like you and me, need to actually go to a place and visit it. But it would indeed be very, very sad if we get to a point where we're not allowed to travel, or we're being strongly discouraged from travel. I mean, I don't think that we're ever going to get to that level of a police state, but what I'm afraid will happen is that at a certain point, if there's enough governments around the world who really want to discourage us from long haul travel, international travel, they're just going to tax the living hell out of airline tickets, so that, okay, they can't ban us from doing it, but they can make it so darn expensive that we just can't afford to do it, Yeah, I think that is a very real possibility, because we're already seeing climate activists here in the US have a tremendous influence over what type of vehicles are going to be manufactured and what vehicles can be sold and such. I know that California has already placed, restrictions about that'll be coming into online in maybe 2030 or so, where you cannot buy gasoline powered vehicles anymore. And I hope we're not going to be heading in this sort of direction with airline travel, where governments want to discourage us from doing it. We're going to really be taxing it so heavily. It's already, let's admit that, if you look at your airline tickets right now as it is, believe me, the airline's not getting most of that to begin with already. The amount of taxes we're already paying on airline tickets is a lot, but they could make it even worse and then get to a point where travel is just for the rich. And then imagine how unfortunate that would be, as if only rich people get to travel to other countries. Wouldn't that be a shame?
Oh, that'd be a disaster. I mean, airlines are already going out of business, right? I mean, they're already struggling. There's some here in Canada this year have gone out of business. If they start taxing even more, we're going to go to Niagara Falls, I think.
Niagara Falls, yeah.
I've got a very interesting experience from last year, actually. Yeah, so we went to Niagara Falls on a road trip across Canada. It's the second time I've been, right? So the first time was 10 years ago. And when I went the first 10 years ago on the Canadian side, amazing nature. Of course, the town was okay. This time last year, pretty much, I couldn't believe how desolate and poverty was
extreme. Emma went for the first time. My partner was like, "Oh, the town behind Niagara Falls is just a bit. How can I describe it? A bit ratty, a bit horrible. It's like a place you take your stag do on because it's like full of classic hard rock cafe, dingy bars, and it's right by this amazing nature, right? So, tell us about your
You were
trip
on
to
both
Niagara
sides
Falls.
of the falls?
No, just at the Canadian side.
Okay. So, right. Well, you didn't even go to the American side?
Nope.
And you thought it was dingy? Holy cow, boy, you should have gone to the American side.
Oh
Well,
wow.
so, as context here, I grew up in this area. Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in Buffalo, which is about 30 minutes away from Niagara Falls. But my father is from Niagara Falls. He grew up in Niagara Falls on the American side, right?
Yeah.
And so he grew up in a thriving Italian neighborhood in Niagara Falls. He was born in 1932. He is turning 92 this summer. And I knew that the neighborhood that he grew up in has fallen on hard times, but I hadn't been there in quite a while. So we were going back there to visit my parents over Easter weekend. And I thought, I want to see the houses where my father grew up in. So we actually flew into the Niagara Falls, New York airport, which is a tiny little, wonderful little airport. I love small airports. And we went right there and I called my mom and I said, Mom, ask Dad, what are the addresses? Do you know the addresses or what are the streets he lived? They didn't know. They couldn't remember. My father, unfortunately, has some memory issues.
Okay.
He could only mention a bakery and a church where he grew up, but neither of which are open anymore.
Yeah.
So we had to do a little detective work. So we did a little detective work, and I found online the draft registration records from my grandfather from World War I and World War II. So I was able to find out the addresses he was living at in 1932 and again in 1942. I'm sorry. In 1919, I think was the first one from World War I, and then the draft registration was 1942. So I got two different addresses. Like, okay, boom, I know he was born in this house and that. So we went back another trip, and I document this in my video. But it was absolutely shocking what we found. I mean, I knew this area was poor, but we get to the first street, and literally the house was not there. Almost the entire street was bulldozed. Like Niagara Falls, when my father grew up there, had like, let's say 100,000 people. Now it's got like 45,000.
Right.
And the place is absolutely littered with abandoned homes, boarded up homes with smashed out windows, and so on and so forth. And it was depressing. It was sad. It was shocking. I literally took a walk around. You'll have to see this in the video that I made. The video is titled, "Why is Niagara Falls Poor?" But you walk around boarded up buildings, smashed out windows. The first street literally was almost completely bulldozed. The house wasn't even there anymore. There was only 2 or 3 houses even standing on that block, and most of them were boarded up windows. It was shocking. The next street, there were people living on it, but the house where he actually lived was all boarded up and it had windows smashed out and stuff like that. It was just absolutely shocking. So I just was walking up to people and asking them, hey, just striking up conversations with you. What happened here? Why did tourism not make this place rich? And I got a variety of answers, and it was really interesting. But it, again, like earlier in the conversation, I was talking about how important tourism is to economies and how tourism creates jobs and such like that. But just like oil, it's the same thing. In a way with oil, is that some places can get rich based upon oil wealth, and other places do not. It's not a guarantee. It's the same thing with tourism. Like some places, tourism has made some places around the world prosperous, but not all of them. And one of them is Niagara Falls. And despite the tremendous beauty and nature there, the thing is that the Canadian side has a much better view, has many more hotels, has many more tourist attractions over there. And so it's completely eclipsed the American side. And because of that, and also because of a lot of mismanagement and poor governance over the years, Niagara Falls, New York is many areas of it, including the Italian neighborhood. It's no longer an Italian neighborhood, but the Italian neighborhood my father grew up in is a complete mess. And the shocking thing is, you go and watch my video, it looks like an apocalypse. But the shocking thing about this, friends of mine who live in that area tell me that it was actually much, much worse 5 or 10 years ago, and that it's better now than it used to be. But it's still shocking.
Isn't this the case for a lot of American towns, though? You see on YouTube and social media people walking through ghost towns, boarded up houses in these small American communities across the country.
Yes and no. I wouldn't say there are many cities that are like that.
Right.
There are a lot of small towns in rural America that are like that. Obviously there are very dangerous and bad neighborhoods in some large U.S. cities. Now, are you talking about Bad neighborhoods, abandoned neighborhoods. What do you mean?
I mean, like just been, deserted. They're gone. They've just been left. Almost like all the population. I'm not talking about bad people here. I'm talking about people who had to move for a certain reason, and it's just declined as a place in terms of poverty, or there's no jobs, or there's no income
Yeah.
coming in.
Especially like in Appalachia, that is the case. Like there's a lot of coal mining towns and places like that. But very few of those are right next to a major tourist attraction. I mean, most of these places, I mean, this is one of the wonders of the world. I mean, this is a place that gets millions of
Yeah.
tourists. So, yeah, there are abandoned places around America. There are forlorn places, but not too many of them are like right next to a huge tourist attraction.
I wonder how or why the Canadians have done it a little bit better than. Don't laugh at me. I got a bus in from Toronto to Niagara Falls, and as you come through the city, I guess at the back via the back streets, if you like, that is a bit grim. Probably not as bad as what you described in your side, but there is like some boarded up.
But that's like mostly tackiness is what you're describing.
Probably,
yeah.
Yeah.
So on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, there's an area called Clifton Hill, which is full of like arcades and video game parlors and cheesy t-shirt shops and stuff like that. And that's bad. It's tacky, it's cheesy, but it's not like tremendous poverty. You don't see as many boarded up houses or stuff like that. Now, the reason for this is about them eclipsing us in the tourism perspective. There's a couple different elements of this. First of all is the geographic nature of it. On the Canadian side, you were looking across the Niagara Gorge directly at the Horseshoe Falls and the American Falls.
Yeah.
You've got a bang on view of it straight across. Whereas the American side, you're looking at it from the side. You've got it like a side view of it where like you're looking off to your side and you do not get a perfect view of it. So you get a much better vantage point from Canada, number one. Number two, they've got some very pretty parks near there, and they've got wineries, and they have a very historic, charming town called Niagara on the Lake. Did you go there?
Yeah, loved it. Yeah, loved it.
So that's a very, very attractive town there, and it has a major theater called the Shaw Festival. So theater goers from all around go to the Shaw Festival, and they're also famous for ice wine, which is have you ever had ice wine?
No.
That is if you have a sweet tooth like me, ice wine is like a dessert wine. It's so good. And they specialize in that ice wine in that area of Ontario. So their side of the falls is filled with wineries, attractive towns, beautiful parks, so on and so forth. And they've got a better advantage of the falls. So they've got a lot going on in terms of tourism. And Toronto is the major city in the region. People from Toronto could go down there as a day trip, or if they flew in from Toronto or wherever. So Buffalo is a much, much smaller city than Toronto. And so the U.S. side of Niagara Falls is pretty forlorn. As you mentioned, there is a Hard Rock Cafe there and a lot of really cheesy shops and stuff, but it's not good.
Yeah, you're right. It's tacky versus, I guess, real poverty. Yeah, I think that's the...
And danger, I would say, too. Like, I put this on my YouTube video. You can look at it, but I looked at the crime reports for the zip codes over there. And there's a website that gives like a rating for each zip code, A, B, C, D, or F, for danger and crime. And those two zip codes that my father grew up in are unfortunately both given a D- to this website.
Oh, okay.
So there are homicides, there are carjackings. There's, I'm not going to say that it's like, a war zone there, but it's not super safe. In my video, I asked people, is it safe in your neighborhood? And one guy just laughed and said, I got to be honest. No, it isn't.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. My only question would be, where does your dad live now? Or your parents?
Yeah, so they live in a retirement home in the suburbs of Buffalo. So he lives about just about a half hour away from where he grew up. But I'm not saying it was a wealthy place when he grew up there. My father was the youngest of 9 children, and his mother died when he was young, so he just had his father caring for him. And they didn't have a lot of money, but it was certainly a safe neighborhood back in those days, and it was more family oriented, and there weren't lots of boarded up houses and stuff like that.
New York State. We went to a few random places last year. We went to New Paltz. Have you been there?
No, I haven't. I've heard of it though. What's in New Paltz? State University of New York at New Paltz. That's all I know about it.
Okay, it's just a hippie trail type town, right? With people
really?
From 70s and 80s just settling down there. Shops don't until 11. Very colourful, very Himalayan type shops. Yeah, just a quirky town.
Really? Is it nice?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Is it near Woodstock?
Yeah, so we went to Bethel Woods. Yeah, that's the other place we went to.
Interesting. No, I'll have to check that out. Now, what were you doing? You were just roaming around?
I'm a Jimi Hendrix fan, so I had to go to Bethel Woods site for the Woodstock
Ah,
Festival,
okay.
and then New Paltz was kind of on the way, or on the way
Okay, I'm
back.
looking right now. Okay, so it's just a half hour south of Woodstock. I'm looking at my
Mm.
map. Okay. I'll have to check it out. I've been to Woodstock, but I've never been to New Paltz. I know there's a university there. That's all I knew about it.
I think if I was to do a YouTube video on it, because I'm into YouTube a bit as now as well, I would probably go back there and
Mhm.
just ask a lot of people like, why have you settled here, and what is the vibe here? Because it's mostly older people, very colourful, very hippie and chilled.
Now,
What's the
did you
reason
do
for
a
this?
Footsteps of Jimi Hendrix video while you were there?
No, I don't know. No video really. No, no.
Because two of the most popular videos I've ever done on my YouTube channel are Footsteps of Kurt Cobain videos that I did out in Aberdeen, Washington. Super interesting because I'm a big Nirvana and Kurt Cobain fan.
Oh
And
wow.
several years
Okay.
ago, I went out there and I went to some of the towns where he grew up. It was super interesting. And I found his uncle, Gary Cobain,
Okay.
who is quite an interesting guy he still thinks that Courtney had Kurt bumped off, and he
Bumped off.
actually, was
Mm.
telling me about that on video. I was like, well, that's not interesting. And this is Kurt Cobain's uncle. So you find that's the one thing about travel again, too. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great. I love doing footsteps trips. I do them all the time.
Ah, we did go to Aberdeen last year as well. It's part of the road trip. Yeah, I'm a Nirvana fan as well, but probably not as much as Hendrix by far. But yeah, we went through.
There's a sign on the road as you're entering Aberdeen that says "Come as you are." They made
Yeah,
it the official motto of Aberdeen, Washington, which is really cool.
yeah, interesting place.
But of course, Kurt hated Aberdeen when he grew up there. He didn't
That's why
not
he
like
left,
he
right?
liked it. Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned your YouTube. Please tell the listeners, like, you obviously do your articles, you write as well, but YouTube, you've got some decent followers, and I'm now a subscriber, so I'm going to start watching and catching up on your YouTube stuff.
Thank you.
What's your intention with that channel?
So that is, I call it, it's like the visual manifestation of my wanderlust. It's basically like I'm an intensely curious person.
Yeah.
That's what fuels my wanderlust. And so it's all based upon indulging my own curiosity. So the other day, this was going to an Amish community. Oftentimes it's pursuing different stories. In Niagara Falls, it was searching for the two houses where my father grew up and trying to understand why this looks like crap. We were on, there's quite a bit of content from the Caribbean. I live and go on cruises sometimes. So yeah, it's basically just, it's a lot of different things. It's basically my curiosity and whatever interests me at the time. Now you're British, so I have to tell you too, aside from my Kurt Cobain videos, my most popular videos are all about British accents, which is weirdly enough, because I do have a fascination with British accents.
Okay.
And especially with northern accents, different accents from the north, and also regional accents from Great Britain. I'm fascinated by those. So I've got some accents about videos about broad Norfolk accents. That's one of the Lancashire accents, Yorkshire accents, different ones. But I like accent videos too, because I find people are fascinated by accents. And I know that I am too, because usually here in the US, you hear British accents a lot, especially in our commercials or television, but it's usually received pronunciation, especially not northern accents.
Definitely not.
But I don't know. I'm very fascinated by especially northern accents, so I like them a lot.
So do I have an accent then, in your opinion?
Your accent's very hard to play. It's not like classic received pronunciation. I really can't place your accent. I know you said you're from Norwich, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that area, if you have the regional accent from that area, but your accent I couldn't place. I couldn't guess it. I don't know.
No, so the Norfolk or Norwich accent is very distinct. So in UK, if you interviewed a bunch of Norwich City fans, soccer, right? They're going to be locals, right? And they're going to speak in their accent. Other parts of UK, like, oh yeah, they're from Norfolk, farmers, sort of almost a bit like the West Country accent in a way. So it's that sort of twang to it, but I don't have it. Yeah, I just don't.
You don't have especially not the broad Norfolk accent.
No.
Now the broad Norfolk accent is an interesting one, because I think I remember hearing that when I was in Norfolk. But wait, you said the Norfolk football team, but didn't you say you're an Ipswich football fan in one of your episodes?
Yeah, and they're the rivals of Norwich, and they beat us at the weekend, so it's not been a good weekend.
So why don't you root for the team of your hometown?
That's a different story.
Okay, all right. For another episode, okay.
Yeah. But it is very tribal in UK. You're
Oh, definitely. Which team you support is very important.
Yeah. So I am a bit of an outlier with that, because people from Norwich normally support Norwich, and I support Ipswich, which was a bit the enemy, really. That's like
right.
Growing up in Liverpool and support Man United. You just don't do it. But I have done it.
Ah.
Yeah.
You've done it. Maybe that's why you need to live in Vancouver.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't do sports here, though, so they're not interested in it. Okay, that's interesting, the accents, because I'm interested in it as well. Because from my point of view, because I don't have the Norfolk accent, I have in my eyes, and my girlfriend takes the piss at me a little bit, but I have in my eyes the generic British accent. And anywhere north is just an accent, but they all have different accents, I know, and I can tell which ones are different. But going from Liverpool to Manchester is half an hour, 45 minutes, they're completely different. And that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing about your country. We don't have this in the US. We've got regional accents, but not as many of them as there is in the UK. On a relatively small island, the amount of accents is astonishing. It's great. But I think they're dying out a little bit. That's the thing that concerns me is I've noticed in my travels around your country, I've spent a lot of time there. You've got to find sometimes an older person to have a really good regional accent.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe that is part of globalization, right?
Maybe it is. I don't know. Or just young people are trying to. Maybe young people aren't proud of their regional accents, especially if it's an accent that's not considered like a glamorous one in the UK. Right, exactly. Yeah. Like, for example, I mean, like one accent that I haven't explored in your country, because I guess I haven't spent enough time in the right parts of your country to do this, or the right parts of London, is I love the Cockney accent.
Oh, yeah.
So the next time I go to your country, I really want to do a video all about hunting for the perfect Cockney accent. And I'm not even sure where in London to look for it anymore, because the working class bits of London just aren't really there anymore. Like, I feel like there's been such intense gentrification that I don't even actually know where to look for the Cockney accent anymore.
Well, okay, I can tell you a
little
bit.
Do you have any advice?
Yes. So I think the traditional Cockney person is not existing anymore, because the hospital would be based in Bow. So BOW, right? There's a tube station in Bow. That's where the original Cockney was born. But now that hospital is not there. So I think traditionally the Cockney is dying out because they're now born in other hospitals in different parts of the city. So the area you probably should start looking at is Bow and that area. It's like East London.
Yeah, but they're not there anymore though, right?
No, but I guess you'll find older people who are
East
Cockneys.
London is, the East End. I've spent time in the East End.
Yeah.
I do not hear the Cockney accent in the East End anymore. Like, wow. Shoreditch, are you kidding me, man? It is so so trendy and posh there. You can't find a good classic Cockney accent in Shoreditch, man. You've been away too long.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And there's the Mockney accent as well. Do you know that?
No.
So the Mockney accent is basically sounding like a Cockney, but not born in East London. So that could be people from like Watford or West or North, but in the local parts of London, not the Shoreditch areas where it's a bit rari.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to admit though, I like Shoreditch. I stayed in Shoreditch once at the Ace Hotel, which is one of those trendy hotels where they give you a record player in your room. I love a hotel that give me a record player. I stayed in Shoreditch. That is such a cool and hip neighborhood, but damn, there was no Cockney accents there, James. None that I could find.
No. So
I gotta look, man. I know they're still around. You ever seen the show the Up series, 28 Up, 35 Up, 42 Up?
No, not seen that.
49 Up. Oh, you got to see that. I mean, do you like documentaries?
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Okay. If you like documentaries, you got to see this. It's a British series too. I'm surprised you never heard of it. But every 7 years, they follow a group of people. They've been following these people since they were literally 7 years old. So what they did was they followed a bunch of British school children starting at age 7. Half of them were rich, came from like privileged backgrounds, and half of them came from a working class background. And they followed their lives all the way through. Like, I think now somebody could, check me on this, but they're at like 63 up. I think the last one that came out, these people are now like in their 60s. But one of the guys on the Up series he's a cab driver, but like he's a retired cab driver. This guy has a perfect Cockney accent, but he's in his 60s and he doesn't live in London anymore. He lives now in like, what's the place in Spain where so many Brits live on the Costa del Sol? Marbella, thank you. You might be able to find more Cockney accents in Marbella than in Shoreditch these days. So I could be wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That'd be a good investigation. Yeah, I'd be keen to watch that.
It will be. I'm going to do that. Next time I'm in your country, I'm going to make a YouTube video hunting for the perfect Cockney accent.
That's brilliant. And just to finish the episode, can you tell the listeners where can people find you?
They can find me. Should I give my street address or? Because I don't mind getting visitors here in Florida. And now it depends. Do they need a place to stay? I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida. You can find me. If you look around St. Petersburg, Florida hard enough, go to the cheap restaurants in St. Petersburg, Florida. You might bump into me. No, seriously. My website is daveseminara.com, and I'm Mad Traveler on YouTube. That's where you can find me. Mad Traveler.
Awesome. I'll put the links back in the show notes, like the first episode.
Thank you.
Dave, thanks for coming back on the podcast. It's been a great chat.
Thank you. It's been fun. Cheers. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast episode today. If you've been inspired by today's chat and want to book some travel, if you head to the show notes, you'll see some affiliate links below which help support this podcast. You'll find Skyscanner to book your flight. You'll find booking.com to book that accommodation. Want to stay in a super cool hostel? You'll see Hostelworld down there too. You'll find Revolut to get your travel card sorted. Click the GigSky link to get your eSIM ready for your trip. And more importantly, you'll find Safety Wing Insurance to get that travel insurance for your trip. There are many more to check out, so when you click that link and book your product, a small commission goes towards me and the Winging It Travel podcast. Thank you in advance and enjoy your travels.